All right, so today we're going to be talking about something kind of interesting that you sent my way, and it was this discussion about Trump tariffs and aluminum manufacturing in the U.S.
Yeah, it was on Fox Business, and Maria Bartiromo was talking to Jesse Gary, the CEO of Century Aluminum.
Yeah, and so what I thought would be really interesting to kind of tease out for the listener is what exactly are like the on-the-ground realities and the anticipated benefits of these tariffs, particularly focusing on domestic production and national security, and Century Aluminum kind of offers like this really interesting microcosm for us to take a look at.
Yeah, definitely.
So, let's start from the very beginning. Like, why did these tariffs even come about in the first place?
Right. Well, the objective that President Trump articulated was to revitalize these critical U.S. industries. And he really honed in on steel and aluminum industries. And his aim was to bring back manufacturing to the USA.
Right. Bring those jobs back.
Exactly.
So you know what exactly happened with these tariffs?
Well, he did implement tariffs on aluminum and steel imports. And one of the things that was interesting in the discussion is that they talked about the anticipation of what they called reciprocal tariffs, which were scheduled for April 2nd. And Treasury Secretary Mnuchin had actually said that those reciprocal tariffs could potentially be stacked on top of the existing tariffs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're really trying to get this done.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just, imposing these tariffs. It was really about boosting domestic production of these materials and, closing these loopholes that allowed foreign countries to circumvent the tariffs that were initially imposed.
Exactly.
So let's kind of dive into Century Aluminum here.
Okay.
They were really impacted by these initial tariffs that were put in place back in 2018, weren't they?
Yeah, Jesse Gary, the CEO, said it really had a very significant and positive impact on their business.
Yeah. And in fact, it seems like because of that, they actually became the largest U.S. producer of primary aluminum.
That's right. Yeah.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And what was really interesting, too, is that they announced that they're going to build the first new aluminum smelter in the U.S. in 45 years.
Oh, 45 years.
Right.
That's a long time.
I know.
So this must be a really substantial kind of investment for the industry.
Yeah. I mean, it will double the size of the domestic primary aluminum industry.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And it will also create 1,000 direct jobs and over 6,000 jobs during the construction phase.
That's huge for these local communities.
Yeah. And even broader than that, it'll have this huge ripple effect because you have the supply chain.
Yeah.
All the companies that are providing the raw materials and the equipment, all of that.
All those upstream and downstream effects.
Exactly. And then you have all the downstream industries as well, like automobiles construction, all these industries that rely on aluminum.
Right.
So it will have a huge economic impact.
And it sounds like it's not something that's just going to be here today and gone tomorrow. This is something that's going to be around for a while.
All right. They said it will operate for at least 50 years.
50 years.
Yeah. So this is a very long-term investment.
Yeah. So we're talking about aluminum, and I think a lot of people probably, think about, soda cans or something.
Right.
But it's actually way more critical than that when we're talking about national security.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, they talked about this in the discussion. You can't build a modern fighter jet without aluminum.
Right.
It's essential to the automobile industry. It's essential for our electrical grid.
Wow.
It's in so many things.
So, I mean, how did we get to a point where we're not producing enough of something so crucial right here?
Well, he pointed to things like free trade agreements and China's entry into the WTO as some of the contributing factors that really incentivize manufacturing to leave the U.S.
Right.
So the hope is that these tariffs will reverse that trend.
Right, and bring those jobs back to the U.S. and really, support a strong middle class economy.
Right.
And this was something that Trump really viewed through the lens of national security, didn't he?
Yes. He really wanted to make the U.S. less reliant on other countries, particularly when it comes to these materials that are so essential, like aluminum.
Right. And so let's get into one of the, really big concerns that I think a lot of people have when they're talking about aluminum in particular is the problem of dumping.
Right.
Can you kind of explain what that is for the listener?
Yeah. So dumping is when a country exports a product at a price that is lower than the price it normally charges in its own home market. And they identified China as the primary perpetrator of this dumping practice.
Right.
Particularly when it came to aluminum.
Right. And the problem, too, is that other countries were exempted from these tariffs.
Exactly. Right. So even if there was a tariff on aluminum coming from China, they could just send it to another country that was exempt and then just ship it to the U.S.
So it's like this kind of workaround?
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
And it could also incentivize those countries that were exempt to increase their own aluminum production.
Right. Just flood the market
Exactly.
with cheaper aluminum.
Right.
Okay, so what's the current administration's response to this kind of problem?
Well, they said that there are going to be no exemptions or exceptions to the current tariff program.
Wow.
Right.
So they're really trying to close those loopholes.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so one of the things that I think a lot of people kind of, get concerned about when they hear about tariffs is that it's going to impact prices.
Right.
So what is the expectation with aluminum pricing?
Well, Jesse Gary said that he doesn't really expect that there will be a significant material impact on aluminum prices.
Okay.
He even pointed to the 2018 steel and aluminum tariffs and said that studies showed there wasn't significant inflation as a result of those tariffs.
So really the goal here isn't to make aluminum super expensive. It's really just to encourage domestic investment in the industry.
Exactly. It's all about job creation here and increasing U.S. production.
Right. Okay. And obviously these kinds of things, they always face criticism.
Right.
What kind of perspective did the discussion you shared offer up about those criticisms?
Yeah. Well, they talked about the people who live in communities that have been ravaged by job losses in the manufacturing industry.
Right.
And they specifically talked about towns along the Ohio River as an example.
Okay.
And they said that for those people, tariffs are viewed as a really positive thing, a way to potentially revitalize their communities.
Right. Or bring back some of those lost opportunities.
Exactly. And they see it as a long-term investment that could have a really significant positive impact on their families and their communities.
And, we have to remember this isn't like, a quick fix kind of thing. We're talking about 50 years for this new smelter. This is a real commitment.
Absolutely. It's a long-term play.
Yeah. And it's not just about the economic impact. It's about the quality of those jobs, right?
Yes, absolutely. And they said that the average wage and benefit package at Century Aluminum Smelters is around $140,000 a year.
$140,000.
Yes.
That's incredible. And these are jobs that can really support families.
That's exactly. They're long-term careers. You can have a whole career there. And they even said that there are families that have worked at these smelters for generations.
Wow. So really, this has been a really interesting look at, the effects of these tariffs on the aluminum industry. And, just to kind of recap, it really does seem like, we're talking about domestic investment, job creation, national security. It seems like there's a lot of different pieces that kind of play into this.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for listening to this session of Deep Thought Podcast.
We hope this exploration provided you with some valuable insights.
If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel.
We also have other podcasts exploring a wide range of fascinating topics.
For those of you who would like to delve further into this, we have some links below on the topics that we discussed today. And here's a final thought for you to consider. Given the interconnectedness of global trade, how might the long-term success of these domestic manufacturing initiatives also reshape international economic relationships in ways that we might not fully anticipate right now?
That's a good question.
So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, see you next time.
Bye.